The unexpected discovery. One quiet evening, John was walking by the river, trying to clear his mind after a long day at work. The sun had just set, casting a warm orange glow across the water. The sound of the river rushing past was calming, but something felt different today. He couldn't quite explain it, but there was a strange feeling in the air, like something was about to happen. As John walked along the riverbank, his eyes caught something out of the ordinary. At first it seemed like just a bundle of sticks and debris caught in the current, but then he saw it, a small, glowing object. His heart skipped a beat. He took a few cautious steps closer, squinting his eyes to make sure he wasn't imagining things. As he got closer, John's breath caught in his throat. He could see small hands and feet, glowing softly in the dim light of the evening. It wasn't a bundle of sticks. It was a baby. But this wasn't any normal baby. The skin was slightly translucent with a soft, shimmering glow that looked like it came from another world. John's mind raced. What was this? How had it ended up in the river? His first instinct was to turn away, to walk back and forget he had seen anything. But something about the baby made him stop. Its big, wide eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, it felt like they were communicating silently, like the baby was asking for help. John hesitated. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't just leave it there. The baby was helpless and he couldn't ignore it. Slowly, he knelt down by the river's edge and gently lifted the baby out of the water. The tiny creature didn't make a sound, just stared at him with those large, knowing eyes. As he cradled the baby in his arms, John felt a strange warmth spread through him, like the baby was calling to him in a way he couldn't explain. He didn't know how or why, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just leave this baby in the river to fend for itself. John stood up, his mind swirling with questions. Where had the baby come from? Why was it alone in the river? And why did he feel so connected to it already? Without thinking much further, he turned and started walking back to his house, the baby still in his arms. The journey back seemed longer than usual, his thoughts filled with confusion and curiosity. But deep down, he knew one thing. His life had just changed forever. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an unspoken connection to the baby. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he had a feeling that this was only the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change not just his life, but possibly the future of the entire world. By the time he reached home, the sun had completely set, and the night was settling in. As he stepped inside, John gently placed the baby on his couch, wrapping it in a soft blanket. The baby's tiny body curled up, its eyes still wide open, staring at John as though waiting for something. John sat down beside the baby, still processing everything that had just happened. His mind was racing with questions, but there was one thing he was certain of. Whatever this was, whatever was happening, he couldn't turn his back on it now. And that was just the beginning. The alien women's arrival, the night stretched on, and the only sound in John's small house was the soft rustling of the wind outside. The baby slept peacefully on the couch, its small form curled up in a blanket, but John couldn't sleep. He sat across the room, his mind racing with unanswered questions. Where had the baby come from? Why had it been abandoned in the river? And most importantly, why did he feel so connected to it? John tried to push the thoughts aside, telling himself to rest. He needed to figure this out, but he couldn't do that without sleep. However, sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he was haunted by the image of the glowing alien baby. It was as if the child was calling to him, reaching out through the darkness, asking for something he couldn't understand. As the hours dragged on, a sudden knock on the door broke the silence. John's heart leapt in his chest and he froze in his seat. It was too late for visitors. Who could it be at this hour? Slowly, he stood up, glancing over at the baby on the couch, who remained completely still. He moved cautiously towards the door, unsure of what to expect. Another knock, this time louder. John took a deep breath and opened the door. Standing before him were two women, both dressed in strange, shimmering clothes that seemed to shimmer like the stars. Their skin glowed softly, the color of moonlight, and their eyes were large and almond-shaped, full of intelligence and mystery. John blinked in disbelief. Were they real? Had he gone crazy? It was like something straight out of a science fiction novel, but this was his reality now. They were real, and they were here. The women didn't speak at first. Instead, they stood silently, their intense gaze fixed on him. He couldn't help but feel that they were studying him, evaluating his every move. He tried to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, one of the women stepped forward, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Where is it?" she asked in a voice that sounded both musical and foreign. John couldn't understand the language, but somehow he understood the meaning behind her words. She was asking about the baby. The other woman's gaze shifted to the couch, where the baby lay, still and peaceful. John's mind raced. How did they know about the baby? How had they found him so quickly? He hadn't even told anyone what he had found. He didn't know how to respond, so he just pointed to the living room. The women followed his gaze, and their faces softened as they stepped inside. The first woman moved toward the baby, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out to touch its small form. John watched in silence, still unsure of what was going on. The woman's touch seemed to comfort the baby, and for a brief moment, John saw something in her eyes, a mix of relief and sadness. She turned to him, her expression serious. "It is our child," she said, her voice more urgent now. "We are from a place far away, and we have been searching for him. You have no idea what this child means to us, to our people." John could hardly believe what he was hearing. Alien from another world? He looked at the woman in disbelief, unsure if he was dreaming or if this was some strange nightmare he hadn't yet woken up from. The second woman stepped forward, speaking in the same strange language, but this time, John noticed a shift. She spoke more slowly, almost as if she were trying to communicate directly with him. "We need your help," she said, though the words sounded strange in his ears. "Our people are in danger, and this child, he is the key to saving them." John's head spun. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice shaking with confusion. "How is this child the key? And why are you here? What do you want from me?" The women exchanged a glance. Then the first woman spoke again. "Our people are at war. Our world is dying. This child, he is the last hope for us to survive. We need to hide him until we can send him back home." John felt his heart race. He could hardly process everything they were saying, but one thing was clear. This wasn't some random encounter. This was bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And the baby, the small alien he had found, was at the center of it all. Before he could respond, the second woman spoke again, her voice soft but filled with urgency. "There are others who would destroy him, who would use him for their own gain. You must protect him no matter the cost." John nodded, his mind still reeling from the revelation. "I don't understand any of this, but I'll help. I can't just turn my back on this child. I don't know what you need from me, but I'll do whatever it takes." The first woman gave a small nod of approval, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are our only hope." The two women looked at each other, and for a brief moment, John thought he saw a flicker of something, fear perhaps, or doubt. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "We will stay," the second woman said, her voice firm. "But we cannot stay here for long. We must keep moving." John's thoughts were still racing, but one thing was clear. He had just found himself in the middle of a situation he couldn't even begin to comprehend. And yet somehow he felt a strange sense of purpose. The baby, the alien women, their mysterious mission, it was all connected, and he was now part of it. As he watched them, John realized that whatever happened next, his life would never be the same again. A strange connection. The days that followed felt like a blur. John barely had time to process everything that had happened. The alien women, whose names he had learned were Lyra and Nara, stayed with him in his home, but they kept mostly to themselves, speaking in their strange language and only sharing bits of information when necessary. The baby, whom they referred to as Keon, remained in the corner of the living room, growing at an alarming rate. It seemed like every day he was getting a little bigger, more aware of his surroundings, and even more astonishingly, more intelligent. John had begun to feel an unspoken connection with Keon. The baby never cried. Instead, his large, wide eyes followed John's every movement with a quiet, knowing intensity. It was as though Keon understood everything John said, even though he had no words to speak. John would sometimes catch the baby staring at him as if he was trying to communicate, and it left him feeling uneasy yet strangely comforted. One morning, as John was having his coffee, Keon suddenly sat up on the couch. His eyes locked onto John's, and for the first time he made a sound, a soft musical hum that filled the room with a strange warmth. John froze, his heart pounding. He had never heard the baby make a sound before. It was almost like a greeting, or perhaps a request. "Lyra," John called out, his voice trembling slightly. "Nara, come here. You need to see this." Both women entered the room, their eyes narrowing in concern as they watched the baby. They didn't speak, but their silence spoke volumes. Lyra moved cautiously toward the couch, her expression softening. As she watched Keon, she gently placed a hand on his small head, and his hum turned into a soft purr, almost like an acknowledgement of her presence. John watched them both closely, unable to shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. It wasn't just the baby's growth, it was the way he seemed to connect with the women, and the way they responded to him. He could see it in their eyes. The love, the protection, but also the weight of the responsibility they carried. Lyra turned to John, her voice almost a whisper. "Keon is special," she said, as if reading his mind. "He is the key to our survival. But his power is not fully understood, even by us. He is capable of more than you can imagine." John furrowed his brow. "What do you mean by power? He's just a baby, isn't he?" "Not just a baby," Nara interjected, stepping closer. "Keon is the last of our kind. He holds the memories of our people, the knowledge of our past, and the power to shape the future. But it is still dormant, waiting to be awakened." John shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around the idea. "Are you telling me this baby could save your entire species? Can he really do all of that?" Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time John saw something in her gaze. Fear. "Yes, but there are dangers. There are others who will stop at nothing to control him, to use him for their own purposes. We have to protect him, John. The longer he stays here, the more dangerous it becomes." John stood still for a moment, the weight of their words sinking in. He had always lived a simple life, nothing extraordinary. Now, in the span of just a few days, he had found an alien child who was the key to saving a dying world. The pressure was overwhelming. But what choice did he have? His life was already intertwined with theirs, and he couldn't just walk away. "I'll protect him," John said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. "Whatever it takes." Lyra nodded, but there was an unmistakable sadness in her eyes. "Thank you. But there is more you need to understand. Keon's power is linked to a force we cannot control. It's in him, and it's growing stronger. Every day. If we don't find a way to unlock it, it will consume him." "Consume him?" John repeated, his voice tinged with alarm. "What do you mean?" Nara stepped forward, her tone more serious than before. "Keon's power is dangerous. It can bring about the destruction of everything, including him. If we don't awaken it properly, it could destroy us all." John's heart raced as he processed her words. Keon, the baby he had found by the river, wasn't just an innocent child. He was a ticking time bomb, a force of nature that, if left unchecked, could change everything. Suddenly, there was a strange noise from the back of the house, a low hum that seemed to vibrate the walls. John froze. He hadn't heard anything like it before, and it seemed to be coming from the direction of the backyard. "What's that?" John asked, his voice tense. Lyra and Nara exchanged worried glances. "It's them," Lyra whispered. "They've found us." John's eyes widened. "Who? Who has found us?" Before either woman could answer, the hum grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The air around them seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was warping. John's breath caught in his throat as he saw a dark shadow moving outside the window, its shape unlike anything he had ever seen. "They've come," Nara said, her voice filled with a quiet fear. "And they won't stop until they have Kian." John turned to Lyra and Nara, his heart pounding. "What are we going to do?" Lyra's gaze hardened. We fight. We fight to keep him safe." The room was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the low hum of the approaching danger. John knew there was no turning back now. His life had changed forever, and the fight for survival had just begun. He was no longer just protecting a baby. He was protecting the future of an entire species. The weight of that responsibility crashed down on him, but he couldn't afford to falter now. Kian's power was growing, and with it, the danger they all faced. There was no turning back. The alien women's secret John had never considered, himself a hero. He was just a regular man, a simple man living a quiet life, but now everything had changed. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with every passing moment. Kian, the alien baby, was more than just a child. He was the key to saving an entire species, and he was under John's care. As the days passed, the sense of urgency in Lyra and Nara's voices grew louder, their anxiety more palpable. The hum from the backyard had stopped, but the tension in the air was thick. John could feel it. Something was coming, something dangerous. As night fell, Lyra and Nara sat in the living room, their faces tense, their eyes distant. John had learned that they had been on the run for years, hunted by a relentless group of enemies who wanted to capture Kian and use his power for their own purposes. That evening, after the baby had fallen asleep, John decided to sit down with them and ask the questions that had been swirling in his mind for days. He needed to understand more about Kian, about the situation they were all in, and about the dangers they were facing. "Lyra, Nara," John said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "You've told me bits and pieces, but I need to know more. I need to understand exactly what Kian is, what's going to happen, and why I'm so important in all of this." Lyra looked at him, her gaze hard and guarded. She seemed to hesitate for a moment before nodding slowly. "You deserve to know the truth, John. You've already done more than we could have ever hoped for. It's time you understood the full picture." Nara, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We weren't always like this. We didn't always have to hide. We were once part of a thriving civilization, but that was before the war." "The war?" John asked, his curiosity piqued. "What war?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "It's a war that has been raging for centuries, a war between us and another species. They are called the Zorath. They are ruthless, and they will stop at nothing to control Kian. They want to use his power to dominate not just our world, but the entire galaxy." John's heart sank. "And you're telling me this baby, Kian, he has the power to stop them?" "Yes," Nara replied, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "Kian is not just any baby. He is the culmination of centuries of knowledge, the sum of everything we have ever learned. His mind contains the knowledge of our people, our history, and our technology. He is more powerful than anything the Zorath could ever imagine." John was still trying to absorb what they were telling him. "So, Kian is a weapon?" Lyra shook her head. "Not a weapon. He is a beacon of hope. He is the key to ending the war. If we can unlock his potential, if we can awaken the power inside him, he can end the war with the Zorath and save our people." John frowned. "But you said that his power is dangerous, that if it's not unlocked properly, it could destroy him." Yes, Lyra answered softly. It's a delicate balance. Kian's power is not something we fully understand. It's tied to his emotions, to his growth. As he learns more about the world around him, as he forms connections with others, his power will grow. But if it grows too fast, if it's awakened too soon, it will overwhelm him, and he will lose control. His power will consume him. John felt a cold shiver run down his spine. And that's why you've been so desperate to protect him. Yes, Nara said, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Kian is our only chance, but he is also our greatest risk. The Zorath are coming for him. They know what he is. They know what he can do. If they capture him, before we can unlock his power, they will use him to destroy everything we've ever known. The weight of their words settled heavily in the room. John was no longer just a protector. He was now part of a war between species, between life and death, between hope and destruction. But there was something else in the air, something he hadn't quite put his finger on until now. It wasn't just fear. It was guilt, a deep, crushing guilt that seemed to hang over Lyra and Nara like a cloud. John couldn't ignore it any longer. You said this isn't the first time you've had to run, he said, his voice steady but probing. What happened before? Why are you so afraid of the Zorath? Lyra looked away, her jaw tight. She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. We failed once. We tried to protect Kian before, but we couldn't. We thought we could stop the Zorath, thought we could hide him. But they found us. They took him. We barely escaped with our lives. John's eyes widened. You lost him? You let them take him? No, Lyra said sharply, her eyes flashing with pain. We didn't let them take him, but we weren't strong enough. We couldn't stop them. They nearly killed us all. Nara placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, and the two shared a silent moment of understanding. John could see how deeply this failure haunted them. They were not just running from the Zorath, they were running from their own guilt. They had failed once, and now they were risking everything to protect Kian. The stakes had never been higher. We won't let that happen again, Nara said, her voice filled with determination. This time we'll be ready. This time we won't fail him. John nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of the situation. He was in deeper than he ever imagined. The responsibility, the danger, it was all too much. But he couldn't back out now. Kian was counting on him, and so were Lyra and Nara. The room was quiet for a long time, the only sound the soft hum of the lights overhead. But in the silence, John knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just protect Kian physically. He had to help unlock the power inside him. He had to help save not just Kian, but an entire species from the brink of destruction. The real battle was just beginning. Pursuit and danger. The quiet of the night had settled over John's house, but peace was a fleeting illusion. It had been days since Lyra and Nara had shared their stories, and despite his best efforts to adjust, John knew things were spiraling out of control. The baby Kian was growing faster than anyone could have predicted. His mind, too, seemed to be evolving, absorbing the knowledge Lyra and Nara had mentioned. But the more Kian learned, the more dangerous the situation became. John sat by the window, gazing into the darkness. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and casting eerie shadows across the room. He tried to tell himself that everything would be fine, that with Lyra and Nara by his side, they could protect Kian. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The Zorath were still out there hunting for them, and time was running out. Suddenly, the peaceful silence was shattered by a loud crash from the backyard. John's heart leaped into his chest. Without thinking, he sprang to his feet, his muscles tense and ready for action. The crash was followed by a low, guttural sound that made his blood run cold. It was unmistakable. Something, or someone, was out there. Lyra and Nara rushed into the room, their eyes wide with alarm. "They found us," Lyra said, her voice tight with panic. "We have to go now." Nara's eyes flashed with urgency. "The Zorath aren't the only ones hunting for Kian. We have to move before the others arrive." John didn't need to ask who the others were. He had a feeling the situation had just become even more complicated. They weren't just being hunted by an alien species. There were others with even darker motives at play. Without wasting any more time, John grabbed his jacket and moved toward the back door. The air outside was thick with tension, the hum of the night broken only by the sounds of footsteps growing closer. He could hear them now, footsteps that didn't sound human. "Get Kian," Lyra shouted. "We can't leave without him." John's mind raced. He ran back into the house, finding Kian still peacefully sleeping on the couch. The baby's small, glowing form appeared almost serene, unaware of the chaos surrounding him. Gently, John scooped him up, his heart pounding as he felt the tiny weight in his arms. It was strange, but Kian's presence seemed to calm him, even in the face of danger. The moment John stepped back outside, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt charged, as if something massive was approaching. Lyra and Nara moved with precision, their eyes scanning the area as they kept close to John, guiding him toward the woods behind the house. Suddenly, the dark figure of a Zorath soldier emerged from the shadows. It was tall, with sleek metallic armor that gleamed in the moonlight. Its face was obscured, but its movements were fluid, almost inhuman, as it surveyed the surroundings. John's breath caught in his throat. This was the enemy, the one they had been hiding from for so long. The Zorath soldier was just the beginning. He could feel it. They were outnumbered. And soon the woods would be swarming with more. "We can't outrun them," Nara muttered, glancing over her shoulder. "They have tracking devices. If they have their way, we'll be cornered in minutes." John didn't know what to do. His mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan, but everything seemed so out of control. He wanted to run to protect Kian, but the enemy was closing in fast. The odds were against them, and time was running out. "We need to fight," Lyra said, her voice low but firm. "We can't let them take him. We can't run forever." John looked at her, stunned. "Fight? How? We're outgunned and outnumbered." Lyra's eyes hardened, and for the first time since he'd met her, John saw the full depth of the warrior in her. "We may not have weapons, but we have each other, and we have Kian. He may not be fully aware of his power, but I know he can help us. If we unlock it, if we trigger his connection, we might have a chance." John glanced down at Kian, still cradled in his arms. The baby's wide, luminous eyes stared up at him, and for the briefest moment, John thought he saw a flicker of understanding in them. Kian wasn't just a passive observer in all of this, he was connected to something greater, something that, if tapped into, could change everything. "We have to trust him," Lyra continued, her voice now filled with certainty. "We need to get him to focus, to awaken his abilities. The Zorath might be powerful, but Kian's power is unlike anything they've ever faced." The first soldier moved closer, but before John could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A low, rumbling noise echoed through the trees, and John's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the soldier. There were more, coming, from all directions, their footsteps vibrating the earth beneath his feet. "They're everywhere," Nara whispered, her voice strained. "We have to make a stand here." Lyra turned to John, her expression fierce. "Now's the time. Focus on Kian. Let him feel your connection to him. Trust him, John. He can do this." John nodded, his mind still a whirlwind of confusion and fear, but he couldn't back down. Not now. Not when Kian needed him. He crouched down, gently placing the baby on the ground, his hands trembling as he held Kian's tiny form. He looked into the child's eyes, and for the first time, he felt something deep within him stir. It wasn't just fear or confusion. It was something else, something powerful. "Come on, Kian," John whispered. "Show us what you can do." The moment the words left his lips, a soft hum filled the air, like the sound of electricity buzzing through the atmosphere. Kian's eyes glowed brighter, the light surrounding him intensifying until it was blinding. John felt a surge of energy, a deep, resonant power that seemed to pulse from Kian and into him. It was as though Kian was drawing from something deep, within himself, a power that was ancient, limitless. The Zorath soldier froze, its mechanical movements halted by the sheer force emanating from the baby. John felt it too. The power was overwhelming, electrifying, like nothing he had ever experienced. He could see the fear in the soldier's eyes, even through its helmet. It was no longer the hunter. It was the hunted. The moment stretched on, the air thick with energy. Then, with a burst of blinding light, Kian released a shockwave that rippled outward, knocking the soldier off its feet and sending it crashing to the ground. The force was so powerful it sent shockwaves through the forest, breaking branches and sending creatures scattering into the distance. For a moment, there was silence. The Zorath soldier lay motionless on the ground, and the woods were still. But John knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The Zorath would return, and this time they wouldn't be so easy to stop. But for the first time, John felt a glimmer of hope. Kian had just shown them what he could do, and if they could unlock that power again, they might just have a chance at surviving the coming storm. The unexpected ally. The dust settled in the aftermath of Kian's incredible display of power. The Zorath soldier lay unconscious, a faint hum of energy still crackling in the air. John stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the motionless figure before him. The light that had emanated from Kian was unlike anything he had ever seen, a raw, uncontrollable force that had taken down the enemy in an instant. But there was no time to marvel at what had just happened. The danger was far from over. John could hear movement in the woods around him, low growls and rustling sounds that hinted at more Zorath soldiers closing in. Lyra and Nara had already moved into defensive positions, their eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the enemy. They had to move quickly. John felt a surge of adrenaline flood through him, his mind racing with possibilities. What else could Kian do? Could he protect them all again? As John picked up Kian and turned to move further into the woods, a new sound cut through the tension, a sharp metallic whistle followed by the distinct sound of footsteps that didn't belong to the Zorath. For a moment, John's heart skipped. Was it more of the enemy? Had they been flanked? The sound grew louder, and from the shadows a figure emerged, a humanoid silhouette with a smooth, reflective surface that glinted in the moonlight. But this wasn't a Zorath soldier. This was something entirely different. Lyra tensed, her eyes narrowing, but Nara held up a hand, signaling for calm. "It's not them," she whispered. The figure stepped into full view. It was a woman, but not like any human John had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, shifting colors in the dim light. Her eyes were large and deep, the color of violet stars, and her expression was both serene and intense. She was taller than any human, and her movements were fluid, almost graceful, as if every step was calculated. In her hands, she held a weapon, a sleek, energy-based spear that hummed softly, radiating a controlled energy. John instinctively took a step back, clutching Kian closer. He wasn't sure whether to trust this new arrival, but the woman didn't advance. She stood still, her gaze fixed on the group, her eyes studying them as if measuring their worth. "Who are you?" John asked cautiously, his voice low but steady. The woman's gaze flickered to Kian and her lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm not your enemy, John," she said, her voice soft yet resonant like a melody. "I've been watching over you all for some time." John was confused. "Watching us? Who are you and what do you want?" "I'm an ally," the woman replied. "My name is Vela. I've been tracking the Zorath for years and I know what they're after. They want Kian. They want him because he holds the key to our survival, and theirs too. But they are blinded by their greed." Vela's words hit John like a wave. She knew Kian's importance. She knew about the Zorath. But why had she come now? What did she mean by survival? And why was she watching them? "Why haven't you helped us sooner?" Lyra demanded, her tone harsh. "Why wait until now to reveal yourself?" Vela's eyes softened and she took a step closer. "I didn't know how to reach you," she said quietly. The Zorath's forces have been moving faster than I anticipated. I had to wait for the right moment. But now we're out of time. They're close, and they know Kian's power is awakening. I'm here to help you unlock it. John's heart raced. Unlock it? But we've already seen what Kian can do. Why does he need to be unlocked further? Vela's gaze shifted to Kian, who was still cradled in John's arms. Kian's power isn't just destructive. It's a force of creation as well. But he's still learning to control it. The energy he unleashed earlier was an instinct, his defense mechanism, but he has the potential to do far more. His abilities are tied to his emotions, his connection with those around him. John's brow furrowed. What do you mean, his emotions? How can that affect his power? Vela stepped closer, her voice growing more urgent. The key to unlocking Kian's true potential lies in his bond with you, his protector. You are the one he trusts, the one who can help him focus, but you must help him learn control. He is still just a child, and the more he feels, love, fear, anger, the stronger his power becomes. But if those feelings become too intense, they could overwhelm him. John felt a weight settle in his chest. You're telling me I need to teach him control? How am I supposed to do that? I'm not prepared for any of this. I'm not a teacher. I don't even understand what's happening. You don't have to be a teacher, John, Vela said softly. You already have what he needs. You have the ability to guide him, to connect with him. Your bond is already stronger than you think. All you need to do is trust him, and yourself. The words hit John harder than he expected. He had always been the type to rely on logic, on practical knowledge. But now he had to rely on something deeper, something he couldn't explain. Vela continued, her voice steady and sure. You've already seen Kian's power. You felt it when it surged through you. Now you must teach him to focus that power. And when the Zorath come again, you will be ready. Together we can stop them. John glanced down at Kian, who was still gazing up at him with wide, knowing eyes. There was so much weight on his shoulders now. The survival of not just Kian, but the future of an entire species was in his hands. He wasn't just protecting a child. He was protecting the future of two worlds. Before John could respond, the sound of distant footsteps reached his ears again. This time they were closer. Too close. The Zorath had found them. Vela's gaze sharpened. It's time, she said, her voice low. We must act quickly. We have no more time to waste. Lyra and Nara exchanged a brief look. The time for hesitation was over. They had a chance, thanks to Vela. But now it was up to them to make sure Kian's power was unleashed in the right way. They couldn't afford to fail. John took a deep breath, looking at the alien woman who had just appeared out of nowhere. She was their ally, and he had to trust her. There was no other choice. Let's do this, John said, his voice firm. We're ready. With that, Vela nodded and the group moved into position, preparing for the battle that would decide everything. The final confrontation had begun, the final decision. The dense forest seemed to swallow them as they trudged deeper into the woods, every step bringing them closer to an unknown fate. John could feel the weight of the journey bearing down on him, the tension in the air so thick it almost felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. Kian, cradled in his arms, had grown eerily quiet, his glowing eyes flickering in the shadows as if attuned to something beyond the reach of human perception. Lyra and Nara followed closely behind, their movements as cautious as they were purposeful, while the mysterious woman, Vela, led the way with an air of quiet authority. John had never been the type to put his trust in strangers, especially not in a time like this. But Vela, though enigmatic and shrouded in secrecy, had proven to be a guiding force in the chaos. She had taken them deeper into the wilderness, away from the prying eyes of the Zorath, leading them to a hidden sanctuary where Kian could learn to control his power. But even now, with the sanctuary within sight, John couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at him. Could they truly trust her? Was this really the refuge they so desperately needed? Or was it just another trap? As they approached a clearing, Vela stopped and turned to face them, her gaze flickering toward Kian before meeting John's eyes. "This is the place," she said, her voice low but firm. "This is where Kian can begin his training. It's safe here, for now." John scanned the area, noting the quiet solitude that surrounded them. The trees were thick, the canopy blocking out most of the light, and the air felt thick with an odd energy. The stillness made him uneasy. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about this place felt different. "We've brought you this far," Vela continued, "but now it's time to make a choice. The Zorath are still out there, and they will stop at nothing to capture Kian. If they find him before he's fully trained, before his powers are unlocked, it will be too late. And if they get their hands on him, they'll use him as a weapon to dominate not just Earth, but the entire galaxy." John felt the weight of her words settle heavily in his chest. He looked down at Kian, the baby's tiny form so fragile in his arms, yet so brimming with power. He had seen it before, the raw, unbridled energy that could obliterate anything in its path. But now, with the Zorath closing in, the question was no longer about what Kian could do. It was about what he needed to do. "Why are you telling me this?" John asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "I already know the stakes. You've made it clear what's at risk. But why should I be the one to unlock Kian's power? Why not you?" Vela's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "Because Kian needs a connection," she replied, her voice gentle but insistent. "His power is linked to the people he trusts, the bonds he forms. You, John, are the one he trusts most. You are the one who can help him unlock his true potential." John's stomach twisted as he processed her words. Could he really do this? Could he unlock Kian's power, teach him control when he himself didn't even understand it? The responsibility was immense. The weight of it all threatened to crush him. He had never been prepared for something like this, and now it felt as though the fate of two worlds rested on his shoulders. "We can't just hide here forever," Lyra spoke up, her voice breaking the silence. "The Zorath will eventually find us, and when they do, they will come for Kian. Hiding him is not enough. We need to fight back." John turned to her, her words echoing in his mind. Fight back. Could they really take on the Zorath? Even with Kian's power? The odds were stacked against them, and every instinct in his body told him to run, to take Kian somewhere far away, somewhere the Zorath would never find them. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the answer. "You're right," he said slowly, his voice thick with uncertainty. "But how? How do we fight them when we don't even know how to control Kian's power?" Vela stepped forward, her expression determined. "You don't have to fight them with force, John. You fight them with Kian's strength. The power within him can change everything. But to do that, you must unlock it. Let him understand it. It's not about brute force. It's about control." John looked at Kian, his heart heavy. The baby was still too young, too innocent. Could he really teach him to control such overwhelming power? Could he help Kian harness his abilities without losing him in the process? John was no stranger to responsibility. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about shaping the future, about deciding the fate of everything. "Kian trusts you," Vela added softly, her voice almost a whisper. "He feels your connection. That bond is the key to unlocking his power. Without it, he's just a weapon. With it, he can be a savior." John's heart clenched. He knew what she was saying was true. He had felt it. The bond between them, the silent understanding, the deep connection that ran through him every time he looked at Kian. But could that be enough? Could his trust in the baby, and the baby's trust in him, be enough to unlock something so vast and uncontrollable? He turned back to the others, meeting their eyes. Lyra's gaze was intense, full of determination. Nara stood quietly, her expression unreadable, but he could see the hope in her eyes. And then there was Kian, his tiny form trembling in his arms, his wide eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "All right," John said, his voice steady, though he felt his stomach twist with uncertainty. We'll do it. We'll unlock his power, but we do it together. We protect him together. Phelan nodded, her expression softening with approval. Good. You've made the right choice. Lyra stepped forward. We'll help you. We'll protect him, and we'll help him learn. We've all been running from the Zorath for too long. It's time to fight back. John looked down at Kian once more, the baby's eyes still locked on his. He didn't know what the future held or how they would manage to face the Zorath head-on. But one thing was certain, he wasn't alone in this fight. They would face it together. As John stood in the clearing surrounded by Lyra, Nara, and Vela, he realized that this wasn't just about saving Kian. This was about saving everything. The battle was no longer about survival. It was about shaping the destiny of two worlds. And with Kian's power, they might just have a chance. With a deep breath, John made the final decision. He would teach Kian to control his power. He would help him unlock his true potential. And together, they would face the Zorath. The future was uncertain, but with the baby in his arms and the bond they shared, John knew that anything was possible. The war for their survival had just begun.